We are talking about the bizarrely named Abigail Haunting. Now, this one is directed by Kelly Schwartz, and this one stars Chelsea Jurkiewicz as Katie, who's our kind of main character. You might be thinking, why is it called Abigail Haunting then? Well, you know, that's just a spoiler there. Anyway, so what we've got here is we have Katie, who has got mixed up in crime. She's like a young woman who has a little bit of a hard life. She's been in foster care her whole life. When we see at the beginning of the film, she's got kind of wrapped up with this guy who's a bit of a criminal. He murders someone, and he's an abusive boyfriend. So she kind of escapes from him and ends up back at a kind of foster care home with this woman called Marge, who was a sort of foster mother and stuff. Now, Marge seems to be having some type of mental breakdown. She just seems to be more or less catatonic in front of the TV. So Katie kind of just moves back in with her. But there seems to be some type of malevolent spirit within this house, or maybe something supernatural that's going on, hence the haunting here. There seems to be some locals here who may well know what's going on. What will happen? Well, you have to watch the movie to find out. So let's first of all talk about what works with Abigail Haunting. So a relatively lower budget movie, and I feel this movie does feel a little bit lower budget, but I got to say, some of the kind of the effects work here, I still found pretty effective. Now, it did remind me of slightly kind of like lower scale movies from like things like Mama. Some of the kind of the visuals from that kind of movie, the one that starred Jessica Chastain. I was reminded a little bit of that with some of the kind of like the ghostly kind of effects here. And although they are on a lower budget, I do feel that the ghostly effects here are pretty good. I mean, they're a little bit CGI in places, but I've got to say I thought they were done to a kind of a pretty good standard. I really enjoyed the character of Katie. I thought she made an interesting kind of lead protagonist here, of someone who comes from, a very kind of checkered past and stuff, and is a little bit sort of maybe, she's a bit self-centered on occasion, doesn't want help, and it made for a kind of an interesting character. I would say the movie is kind of proficiently made. It looks like it's, it is made to a good standard, with a good kind of technical kind of crew behind it. The lighting is good, sound editing, all of that sort of stuff. It's a proficiently kind of made movie. And the biggest thing I would say that in the plus column with this movie is it has a really interesting ending, with the exception of the very last shot. But a good climax, I feel, that is a little bit different. And I say a little bit different because the main criticism I have of this movie, outside of that ending, it plays very much like a generic ghost story that you've seen many, many times. Until we get to that last 10 minutes, I would say. This movie feels like any other ghost story in regards to its plot, into regardless of what's happened. The kind of the scares where we see something off camera, all that sort of stuff. It really doesn't do anything that you haven't seen before. Very, very generic. And as I've mentioned, as I kind of alluded to as well, it has the very last shot of the movie doesn't make sense to me. A lot of films do this, and it's like this, the last shot of the movie is going to be this like shocking moment, and it's like, yeah, but in the context of logic, I don't really think it makes sense about what we've just seen. Anyway, there's that. Some of the kind of the characters to me seemed a little unrealistic. Not so much the main characters, but there are a couple of sort of bit part players. They just seemed a little bit too like they were written characters rather than real people. And the only other criticism I say, there's a little bit of logic issues here in regards to, again, how realistic things that play out. So Katie goes back to the kind of the foster home where she sees Marge, who is the foster mother. But Marge is more or less catatonic. She just sits in front of the TV, doesn't move, and doesn't really kind of appear to be taking care of herself. And then this Katie just kind of moves in and just sort of like just carries on as normal. But you take the supernatural element out of this, it just seems like you would just think, how is this, woman survived? How is she feeding herself, going to the toilet, all this sort of stuff? It's a person who drops off food, but it's just kind of like, how is this woman sort of like... But Katie never questions it. you know, this character, yeah, but there's ghosty stuff going, but she doesn't know that at this point. She's like never questions how the hell this catatonic woman is able to take care of herself, and then just kind of like moves around like kind of just, it's just, well, I'll just leave it. I won't even question it. It kind of bothered me a little bit because it just seemed like sloppy writing to me on that regard. So overall, what do I think? I think this movie is very generic. It's not a bad movie in any stretch, but it's so middle of the road. However, I do think, with the exception of the final shot, the climax does push this to a slightly above average. I try to stay away from half marks. So I would, had I not, I would give this a 5.5 out of 10, just to push it above average. But I don't want to do, it's too, you know, there's too many variables there. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. But in my heart, it's a 5.5. But I will say it's 6, just because I don't like giving half marks, really. Anyway, not bad. Better ending than the kind of the rest of the movie had, you know, deserves, to be fair. But certainly a watchable film. And I don't think anyone will say it was necessarily bad, but you've just seen it many times before. Saved, I think, by a good climax. Save for the final shot of the movie, but you can kind of forget about that. Anyway, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.